Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dennise Pentecostes, and I serve as Banking Relationship Advisor for the Northern Trust San Diego office. Northern Trust is honored to once again serve as presenting sponsor of Expo Chicago. And on behalf of Northern Trust, I am thrilled to welcome you in today's discussion, The Guardians of Art, which is presented in partnership with Freeman's Hindman. The conversation will focus on the importance of prints, print patronage, and the auction house's vital role in stewarding print-making practices. And today, I'm pleased to introduce the esteemed panelists. First, we have Monica Brown. She is Vice President and Department Head of Prints and Multiples at Freeman's Hindman. Next, we have David Cleaton-Roberts, Director of Cristea Roberts Gallery in London. And last, we have Dani Levinas, collector and author of The Guardian of Art, Conversations with Major Collectors, who will be doing a book signing at the end of this panel discussion. Our panel moderator this afternoon will be Phil Sanders, who is the master printer, Phil Sanders, who authored an illustrated history of collaborative printmaking. And now before I turn the mic over to Phil, I do want you all to know that we are filming this panel for future promotional purposes. However, any questions or interactions will not be in our promo materials. And thank you all for being here. And Phil, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. The only difficulty I see with us today on this panel is that we have three highly knowledgeable and very enthusiastic people who have a lot to say. So definitely save up your questions, because we'd like to make sure we take as much time as you need to answer those questions. But for us, I think the thing we had discussed that was most important to really talk about is what is a print first. And since we have David, who is a publisher as well as a print seller or a dealer who deals with estates, there's a very unique perspective. We have a collector who has a very different perspective. And with an auction house, we have someone who's really helping prints continue to have multiple lives long beyond their original purchase and original creation. And so I thought we would start with diving into that question of what a print is first, and we'd start with you, David, with their initial production.
Thank you. Yes, as Phil said, the gallery, we take a holistic approach to prints. We represent artists for their printmaking practice, so we actively commission them to make prints. We represent estates for prints. We buy and sell on the secondary market from places like Hindman's. First and foremost, I think the most important thing to say is that prints are artworks. There's a lot of misconceptions about what a print is. Is it a reproduction? Is it a poster? No. Simply, it's another medium. It's another way of making an original work of art. And being on the booth here on my stand, what I've realized is that a lot of people misunderstand, or they mix up the term unique with original. They think they mean the same thing, but they don't. A print is a work of art that can be unique, or sometimes the techniques allow it to be in an edition. And it just offers artists an array of different practices, an array of different ways of making art.
Right, and those ways or processes happen to be editionable in many cases. So I think the thing to point out about with a print is that it's the editionable or multiple aspect is a byproduct of the process. So it's still an artist-driven creative process first that happens to be editionable. So the idea that it's art first that happens to be a print is really the foundation. And Dani, from a collector's perspective, how would you describe what a print is?
I will say that it never made a difference to me. I didn't buy or not buy something because it was a print. And actually, I have to say that the beginning of my collection were prints. And because it was something that I can afford. At that time, I was very young when I started collecting. And because they were works by artists that I admired. So one of the pictures in this slideshow is a small Picasso print that I bought when I was, I think, 26 or something like that in New York. And I went especially to this dealer in Manhattan that somebody told me that he was selling prints, and of course this was the smallest thing that I can afford it, and I bought it, and I never made a difference between prints and no prints. You enjoy them the same way. It's to me it's a fantastic way to enlarge your collection too. There was a company called Parquet Publishing, and they did objects, but also they did prints.
Absolutely, yeah.
And they don't do that anymore. But that was also a way for me to know new artists. They were showing artists that I didn't know, and that I got involved with them, and then they became very important artists. But I got to know them through the prints.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a wonderful democracy to printmaking, and it's always been there. That it's a way of a lot of people accessing art that couldn't otherwise access it financially, and that's important to a lot of the artists. That sense of democracy and outreach.
And for you, Monica, from the auction house's perspective, is you're getting to see what has been collected, and trying to give it that life to continue to influence in its way. So, for you, how do you really think about or describe what a print is?
So, from a very academic standpoint, a print is just a process where an image is made by an artist and transferred to another support, whether that's paper or sometimes mylar, plastic, any other thing. And I think that what I see people mixing up the most are the differences between prints and multiples. Like, not all prints are made in multiple. There are mono prints. There are many unique prints. Scrolling through here, there's an Andy Warhol where that specific print only exists in a unique form. All the colors of all 36 are different and unique. So I approach it as that transfer process, anything that has that transfer in it. And one of the artists that I think of a lot that we consider his prints, we put them in our print sales because they have that transfer aspect to it, but they're all very unique, is Sam Gilliam. Like, the way that he makes his paper, his handmade paper works, because he's putting so many different things into the paper, each piece of paper is different that he's using as the support. So I think that's kind of what I look at when I'm saying, is this a print? Should this go in the print sale, or should it go into a post-war sale? That's what I kind of look at. So.
Right, that basic.
Yeah.
The basic underlying process. But one of the things I want to highlight that all of you have said is this difference between original and unique. And I think that's a really good way to start to parse that out for the average person, is that it's all original works that may be unique or editioned. And I think that's really the thing to keep the definitions of those separate, that often get conflated and makes conversations confusing, because we really are, this is kind of a great segue into the difference between reproduction and original work, right? And so from an auction house perspective, I'm sure you get this question quite a lot. And so is there a way in which you help describe the difference between something that's reproductive and something that's original in your environment?
So you can always use the term, when we're cataloging, and if you look at the artist line and it's titled after Picasso or after Marc Chagall, those are things that it's maybe a reproduction of a painting. So, for instance, there is a famous lithographer that did a number of works with Marc Chagall that are reproductions of his paintings, Charles Sourlier. However, those works we catalog as after Marc Chagall because the image is not unique to the edition. The image itself is the painting, but Chagall authorized the prints. So that's one of the ways that I differentiate. Generally speaking, I don't handle reproductions, though. That's not something that would be, I tend to handle works that are touched by the artist. So a straight reproduction or a poster would not be something I would handle.
Right, and David, I think this is a good segue for you to describe how these works are actually made as a publisher.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's ultimately that's the bottom line: is has the artist had a hands-on involvement in this work? And if the answer is no, then it's a reproduction. Hence, posthumous prints, reproductions, because the artist has passed away. And it's commonly misunderstood because so when we commission an artist, we work with a lot of artists who know how to make prints, but we're also approaching artists who've never made prints. And our first thing is, how do you want to make a print? What do you think the different mediums of printmaking can bring to your practice? And if the answer is, well, I'm going to send you a JPEG of this painting and let's make a print, the answer is no. That's not how it works, even if it's the most famous painting you've ever made. Because we want them to engage in it. We want them to really draw something artistic out of the mediums and the process. So we work with a number of different studios. I mean, the way I work is that I may approach an artist, talk to them about prints, then introduce them to a number of different master printers, different studios, see who they gel with. We might do a lot of testing. They've got to learn how to make marks on different plates. And then it builds slowly through proofing, through them experiencing different ways of making prints. And through that, then they build their practice. And what almost always happens is if an artist makes a great print and they love it, that then feeds back into their other practice, which for us is the most satisfying thing. Because it's often a lot harder, for example, a painter to make a print than to make a painting.
Yes.
It takes a lot longer and it's a lot more expensive.
It's a definite labor of love, and one of the things that I describe as a printer is we can't, when we're making a print, do all of the things that you do in your studio. There's a necessary distilling the process down to the most important elements, whether they be the way the marks are, the way the colors are, or the way it builds to communicate in that way. Because it is a different process, and there's this material literacy that has to be learned. There's a process literacy. But I've yet to find an artist that has had the opportunity to be invited to work in collaboration with a printer that hasn't become addicted to that process. Because it's the only time that they're supported to that level in the arts, where they have a publisher who's willing to put their money up front first. It says we have faith so much that we will spend our money ahead of time to give you this creative time. And then you have highly skilled printers working with a highly skilled artist. And it's the thing that I talk about a lot, which is a situation that's a 1 + 1 = 3. You want something to be greater than the sum of its parts. And I think you understated it slightly in the fact that he's like, oh, we talk with the artists and the printer. There's a lot of psychology that goes on here in order to make sure that these relationships actually work, because they're very intimate working relationships.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of art. Oh, sorry, Danny.
No, I was going to say that there are things that an artist can do during the process of doing a print that he cannot do in any other medium. And people have to understand that it's a completely different way of working. And actually, sometimes they discover things during the process that they want to reproduce in an oil painting or an acrylic painting, and they can't do it. They can only do it with print making. So it's very important, because all this imagination, they start not knowing how to do it, and they love it, and they keep doing it and doing it because they discover ways of using their brain to something new. And I think that's a fantastic, and you see it sometimes in those beautiful prints. That I think there is only one artist that I remember now, that Rauschenberg, I think, used printmaking to do unique pieces that were mixed between printing and oil and objects and so on. But all of that started with printmaking.
Exactly, and Rauschenberg was famous for saying the 20th century was no time for drawing on rocks, and then later becomes one of the most prolific and well-known printmakers of the 20th century.
That's right.
And Warhol, I mean, I was reading an article the other day about, the most expensive 20th century work of art sold in the world is a print. It's The Shot Blue Marilyn by Andy Warhol, and this article was talking about it and saying Warhol pioneered this amazing technique called screen print, and I was like, well, okay. But, that's never talked about in terms of a print. But that's what Warhol did. Every painting he made virtually was a print.
Yes.
And you see it if you walk through the fair, you will find a ton of printmaking that's been used in painting and been used in sculpture. It's quite ubiquitous now for many artists in their studio practice to incorporate print techniques and printmaking into their general painting practice. And it's because of people like Warhol who brought printmaking out of just maybe works on paper and really took it into this other realm, that printmaking has found its way into all of these other media. And so visually, we may take some of that for granted now, but printmaking has been foundational to many artists' careers for quite some time now.
But I think it can be, you know, when an artist first makes a print, it can be quite intimidating, because a lot of, especially painters, are used to being in the studio on their own, and suddenly being there with a master printer or in the studio with a lot of technicians can be quite intimidating. So it is a, you know, it's a rite of passage for them to actually make something in that way.
I mean, I always tell people, imagine yourself walking in the door and there's 5 or 6 people standing there waiting for you to make a mark.
Yeah.
And it's a blank sheet of copper that the only thing you see is your face reflected back at you. That's the intimidation. Yeah. And so when you see a print on a wall, what you're seeing is the artist's most distilled voice, and that everything that's there is decided to be there. Because in printmaking, you can move things around. You can take it off, you can put it back, you can take a color out, and you can change a color. So what remains is one of the most considered and thought about works of art that an artist will actually make. And so I'd like to ask you, Dani, like what you respond to or what you look for when you're looking at prints.
But I said before, I really don't make a distinction. I think that I was, and I think I mentioned that to you when we talked, I was in an art fair in Madrid, and I saw prints by David Hockney, large size prints and of flowers. And when I saw them from far away, they looked like paintings to me. So I approached them, and then I see that they were absolutely beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. There is no difference. And the other thing that I mentioned to you, and I think it's important to understand, there is a museum in Aspen, I can't remember the name of the museum, that the old museum is about prints from Jasper Johns. It's only prints.
It's the Powers Museum.
And this collector, I think, has every print that Jasper Johns ever did, yes, in every color and in every size. Mm-hmm. And it's just prints. And I think you should go see this museum. It's beautiful. First of all, the architecture is beautiful too, and it's between the mountains there. But the prints are absolutely amazing. And Jasper Johns also was very, very involved in the printmaking.
And Jasper Johns is a great, and I've worked with him over the years, but he's a really great example in that he has an idea, and he will work that idea through every media. He'll make an etching based on that idea. He'll make a lithograph. He'll make a charcoal drawing, an ink wash drawing, and a painting, because he wants to explore that idea in all those different ways, because each of those processes offer something so unique for him to understand about the idea that he has. And so I feel like, when you talk about the artists that you've resonated with over the years, there's been a great deal of exploration of print that really in-depth make lots of images and really come at it from a lot of different ways.
There are many examples. Picasso is another example. I mean, he will have the same theme in ceramics, in a painting, and in printmaking, and even photography. I mean, but print for Picasso was a very important medium. And I know, one of my favorite artists is Francisco Goya. And you talk about printmaking from centuries ago. And everybody goes to the Prado Museum to see the black paintings. And they're beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. But if you look at the engravings of Goya, to me they are better than the black paintings, because he can tell a story with just some very few drawings, and it's absolutely fantastic. And I don't know what the prices are of the Goya.
Not as much as they should be, I'll tell you that.
But they are absolutely fantastic. And there were many editions and different editions and so on, yes, but they are absolutely gorgeous. And he tells a story. And he was able to use that. He used to paint for the kings. But when he did the engravings, he painted for himself. And he painted for the people, and he painted people. He didn't paint the royal prince so he told the story of Spain, that he was living every day in the streets. So he gave him an opportunity that he couldn't do it in paintings.
And I mean, and something to really talk about with Goya with this, why he's considered the last old master and the first modern master is, He used his time to talk about his time. He didn't use allegory or mythology.
Absolutely.
He used his time, and it was so unique, and he did it in print. And what most people
He did it
don't
in
know
print.
is he financed that. He'd do a court painting so he could afford to make his prints. And he wasn't allowed to sell his prints in Spain during his lifetime because it was considered too radical. But his prints, because they were prints, spread all throughout Europe and began to influence generation after generation after generation of artists. So people like Daumier and Delacroix owned Goya prints, and that's how they knew. I mean, Delacroix owned an entire set of Los Caprichos, and that's why he took printmaking onto that mantle. So the prints, the portability of prints, that democratic nature of the print, the fact that you could see the same image in multiple cities at the same time, allows those artists' voices to persist and spread much more so than, say, a single work that is hanging in one person's private home. So for you, David, I mean, as a publisher who deals with estates as well as making new work, talk a little bit about that, the legacy aspect of prints and why artists may make work for that purpose.
Well, I mean, the estates for us are hugely important. I mean, we're lucky enough to work with the Joseph and Annie Albers Foundation and lots of other estates. But, I mean, the example at the moment I'll use is Paula Rego. I mean, I was lucky enough to work with Paula when she was alive. She's a Portuguese-British artist. And she made prints when she lived in Portugal as a kind of radical statement against the government there. She had to hide the plates in her bedroom so they weren't found because she would have been arrested. She came to the UK. She made prints ever since she was at art college. And she used printmaking to elaborate her kind of life story. And she actually used prints to help change the abortion laws in Portugal. She created a very powerful series of etchings of women having illegal abortions to try and change the horrible laws in Portugal. And in the end, she succeeded. And these prints have now got an absolute place in history. And recently, we've been selling them to some very important museums. But it's through the prints that her message and these really important social messages have come out. And I think for us with estates is that, you know, when an artist dies, there's often a lot of prints left in their estate. And we're all about what's the story for the next 20 or 30 or 40 years, not let's sell all the best stuff that's left quickly, which all too often is what's happened. It's how are we going to let people know about these prints? How are we going to arrange museum shows? How are we going to do the proper catalogue raisonné? So it's a long-term project working with an estate and legacy.
Right, because like with Paula in particular, placing them in institutions, and recently I took some collectors to the back room at the Met, which I want to remind everyone is a publicly open and accessible print collection, and I had them pull out the whole series of Paula's abortion series because it was a timely topic, and we were putting it in context with Goya, very specific Goya impressions. Right, it was but to be able to show print having that conversation across many hundreds of years of times of artists using print and art to have social commentary. And because you take the time with estates like that to place them in institutions, they're available for us to actually see. I think that's an important part about print.
And the Met and MoMA bought that series. They only bought them last year. And, you know, when Paula made those prints, she made them in an edition of 15 because she knew that they were the subjects were too difficult for people, and hardly any sold during her lifetime. But she put them out there in exhibitions, but of course now, as you say, they're very potent and very contemporary issues that need dealing with, and so the museums, quite rightly, are now looking at them more seriously.
Right, and it's another thing to say. Sometimes it takes time.
Yeah,
and I think that's what we're talking about here are long-term commitments. From a collector's perspective, it's not just owning and enjoying work, but it's the context of the larger collection that you put it in. From a publisher and an estate manager's perspective, you're thinking about the long term, and from an auction house's perspective, it's really about how do we keep these living, and where do we place them, and how do we make sure that those voices persist. So the three of you have so much in common, with especially with the love of print. But I'm kind of curious as to what each of you might be looking for out of print today, because you have such a long history. What you're looking for or being surprised by.
For me, I think one of the first things I actually look at when I'm looking at a print is who was the printer. And I really do, you'll see in the slides that are rolling, there's an Ellsworth Kelly that comes up, and that was a collaboration with Ken Tyler at Tyler Graphics. And one of the things that I would love to do is just have a whole sale of Tyler Graphics, things that Ken Tyler touched, because his printmaking and his collaborations with the artists really show a knowledge of the medium, and he really, I feel, encouraged artists to explore all kinds of new ways to look at multiples. So that's one of the things that I look at. But for me, I also look at condition. Condition is very important. So even if you have the most amazing, Andy Warhol unique print and it happens to be damaged, it may not be something that every collector is going to want. That's going to affect the value. And part of what I always tell collectors is take care of your prints. That doesn't mean keep them in a drawer, though. That doesn't mean that, because why would you buy something and put it in a drawer? But just make sure that it's behind UV plexi. Make sure that it is hinged with acid-free materials. And if you just go to a nice framer, that's all that you need to do. It's not difficult. So condition is big, and also, I look at the printers, and I also look at, the trajectory of the artist. Like, when in that artist's career was that print made? And what does that reflect in their kind of overall output of artwork? And that kind of determines value to an extent. So those are the things that I look at when I'm looking at prints. But because I work in an auction house, I am very much looking at price and value when I come to a print. It's really difficult for me to come at it without that in mind. Yeah, I always have that lens. But there are moments where I stand in front of a print. I think one example is I feel every time I'm in front of a William Kentridge, I'm just stopped. Just like, that is an incredible print. And another time that happened was Carrie James Marshall's print that you'll see on this reel here. We had the pleasure of handling that print, and that was printed by the artist. And it wasn't until I got it out of the frame behind the plexiglass that I saw the depth and texture that he was able to achieve in the image. It was just phenomenal, and it was just so exciting to look at. So I don't want to say that I'm always looking at values, because there are moments where I have very exciting moments where I see something. But I think that gets to the crux of the question.
It does, and I think, Dani, you had said something in one of our early conversations about it has to hit you in the gut.
Yeah.
There's that, and I think, you're relating that, and that gut feeling.
I think about the times that I get emotional when I see a print, and I have no idea who the printer was. I know the artist, but I don't look at the same way that you look at it.
Right.
For instance, if you see a print by Richard Serra, for instance, with the texture of the print, and you say, how did they do that? I don't know how they did it technically, and I don't really care how they did it, and I don't really know who the printer was, but I know that Richard Serra was involved in that in the final result, and that's what takes me and say, I have to have this, because it's so beautifully done, and it happens with many different artists. And so I look at it from a different point of view, and of course I look at the price, but what is important first as a collector is, does it talk to me? Yeah. And if it does, then I do the rest of the investigation. But it's not, you are looking at things from a different point of view completely.
Right.
I think it's interesting because Richard Hamilton, who I work with, who was an amazing printmaker and would spend 2 years making one etching, he said to me, people don't buy prints, they buy images. First and foremost, they have to be hit in the gut by the image.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if I spent 2 years making the most complex etching in the world. It's the image at the end of the day that's going to knock them dead. I mean, for me, when I look at a print, I'm looking at, has the artist pushed themselves and the printer really pushed the boundaries of what's possible? And that's what excites me. I mean, there's a wonderful quote by David Bowie where he says, to be successful, you have to walk into the water until your feet just stop touching the bottom. Then you're interesting. then you can be creative. Don't be in a safe space. And I think with printmaking, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking, you know, I've had so many situations where artists or printers have rung me up and screamed down the phone, you know, I can't do this. It's not going to work, and you know, it's going to be too expensive. And it's like, great, here we go. That's the grit of sand that's going to create something amazing. That's what I look for.
Right, that tension.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it's something that's come through is that physicality as well.
Yes.
I think one of the things that as a printer we often talk about is that physical space, and we talk about where ink sits on the paper or in the paper, and some people look at you like you're crazy because it all just looks flat. But, you know, when you really get up close to a print, you handle one.
Right.
You know, and print has that tradition of holding it in your hands. There's a very different relationship when you are that close to the physical object itself. And you really start to see how that subtlety of movement and all that effort to get it just right, you know, because it's a labor of love.
Absolutely, yeah, it definitely. I mean, it is a labor of love. You're not doing it for the money.
Right, and one of the things, you know, that I point out often too is that when someone's publishing a print, they're putting their money up front first. So that's an investment they're making. It's a gamble. You may never get anything back. And, you know, from a general gallery perspective, they have all their overhead, but they're not paying generally to make the work that's going on the wall. The artist is usually covering those costs and hoping to recuperate. But a print publisher is different. They fly the artists in or move the printers around. They have to get all of the work made, and it can take a year or two of just pumping money into something, hoping you get that thing back that actually has that feeling, that has that, you know, unexpectedness.
Yeah, and you know, we're working with artists. Artists are unpredictable people. You know, they're not always giving you the great image which is going to sell, but you back them. You know, you pay for the project, and it's a very privileged position because of that aspect. You know, we're in the studio a lot more than other dealers might be. We're having conversations. We're party to the creative process, so it's a great privilege too. But it is a bit hair-raising sometimes. You know, when an artist comes to you and says, this is what I want to do, and you do the math, you're like, oh, okay.
And I think that's, you know, it dovetails onto what you had said earlier, too, like where did this happen in their career? You know, what David's talking about is long-term support. So you start working with an artist, if you develop a really good relationship, and that's something you want to continue, that's lifelong. You're going to be making prints with them for the next 30, 40 years. And you're going to be there through the good images and the not so good images, but you're there to help them progress. You know, and I'm sure you see this as a collector quite often. You know, when you collect an artist in depth, that sometimes you're buying work that you may not even understand, but you love that artist and you want to make sure that they can keep making work. And so purchasing is one of the ways to help an artist continue to grow and continue to inform our lives.
I want to know what people think about the difference between prints and photography, because there are similarities on the perception from the public point of view, and if they see a photograph of a famous photographer, do they think the same way about the value and the importance of that work of art, the same way as they think when they see a print?
I generally think they're not considered the same, even though, you know, photography is a print process, and a lot of artists use photography. And so, you know, from my perspective, photography is really a very different artistic intention that the artist is using, the way they're trying to capture the world in a specific way, or take a slice of it, or focus us to a specific point in time, that freezing of time. Whereas traditional printmaking is really about something else. It's about how an idea evolves over time, right? So they are both print processes, but I really think the artist's intention.
But from the point of view, of the public or the collector, when they have an opportunity to see a photograph, that are 15 of them, and that they were done during the life of the photographer, because it also has a difference between if it's after death and so on. So from the point of view, from that point of view, and you probably know more about that.
Yes.
So why don't you tell us?
I think one point to make here is I also handle our photography sales at Freeman's Hindman, and there are not a lot of crossovers in buyers for photography sales and print sales. They're different buyers. generally speaking. There are a lot of collectors that have photography and prints, but generally speaking, they're not as active in both areas. I think there's also a difference. A photographer like Sugimoto, like Hiroshi Sugimoto, he very tightly controls the edition size of his works. And a lot of earlier photographers, say 20th century, photographers that were producing in the 1950s to probably the 1980s, they weren't as tightly controlling the edition size. So that's kind of what we're running into on the secondary market, is that the images can be found in so many places. If you want a Slim Aarons, you can just buy a freshly printed one online. But it is really these contemporary artists that control the edition size for photography. And I think that they've taken that cue from printmaking, because prints are very tightly controlled editions. I think, David, if you have an artist that makes an edition of 50, you're not going to one day print 50 more. It's closed.
Sometimes I'd like to, but no. No, it's true. You make those decisions about the edition size at the beginning, and then once it's done, it's done. When an edition's finished, the plate, the matrix is destroyed, and we have fully documentation, which we know is a legally binding document. I think the other difference with photography is that because of the nature of the process, you often find multiple editions in different sizes, posthumous editions. Right. You simply can't do that with printmaking because the plate, whatever it is, or the screen, that determines the size. And, like you, I don't see much crossover with photography and print collectors. I see more crossover with print collectors and drawings collectors.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
But ultimately, again, it's about the image. A knockout photographic image just as powerful as a knockout print image.
Yeah.
And there's certain artists like Hockney who traverse both.
Yeah.
I mean, Hockney blurs those boundaries. He loves disrupting what's photography, and I think with recent technology as well, like inkjet, that has blurred the boundaries, because inkjet is just a way of outputting an image onto paper, and that image can be a print or it can be a photograph, and some artists enjoy that blurring as well.
Yeah, and it's been the way through all new technologies for the last 1,350 years of printmaking.
Right.
So artists are always, their part of their job is to disrupt and maybe cause some problems for everybody else down the line. Right. And it's because they're not looking at it for all the reasons from the collecting and the sales end. They're looking at it from the art end. And our job is to support their creative endeavors and whatever they may be. And I think that sometimes can get a little messy, but for us, it's always about transparency. I think,
absolutely.
David and I would agree, the most important thing is just be completely transparent in everything you do, and there won't be problems.
Right.
So. I mean, if you're on at an art fair, or you're looking to buy a print, the best thing to do is just talk to the person you're buying the print from, speak to them, speak to the publisher if they are the publisher or the dealer, and they should be able to give you very straightforward answers. There should be no smoke and mirrors there, and as Phil says, it's about transparency.
I mean, because for us, we love the work and we want other people to love it too, so we're gonna tell you everything we can about it, and because they are labors of love, not just for the artist but for everyone else involved in it, from the making and the selling aspect and the long-term life. Because I think something to really touch on, and we haven't touched on that much, is that what prints represent is the preservation and the multiplication and amplification of an artist's voice over time. So it's not just how it affects today. The likelihood of a print surviving for generations is very high if it's been editioned and it's been disseminated. And so what that artist has to say is important, and who you print is who we're choosing, which voices we're choosing to preserve for future generations. So there's a great deal of responsibility when it comes to publishing as well as collecting when it comes to prints, because those works are much more likely to survive. So for you, David, this is always the hardest question. I get asked it all the time too.
Okay.
How, what's part of your selection process for art? And I don't mean to put it on the spot in a way that, everybody's going to be knocking down the door, but I just really want to, highlight relationships.
Because the honest truth is not all artists can make prints. In the same way, not all artists can paint, not all artists are sculptors. So I suppose I'm looking for an artist where I think, first of all, I've got to love the work. I've got to believe in the work. And then I've got to feel that they can do something interesting and different with print than their other practice. Or they can push their other practice in a different direction with print. And, we work with young artists. I mean, some artists I've taken on when they've been in their 80s with that same ethos. There's not one thing I'm looking for other than just, can they do something original and different with printmaking?
When I get asked to work with artists, I generally, the thing I ask the artist first is, what's the thing you can't do in your studio that you're trying?
Yeah.
And that's where we start print. Because if they can do it in their studio, they should just do it in their studio. They'll make more money. Right. It'll take less time. Yeah. It's the problem that they can't solve. And I think that's what, collectors respond to, is that there's some sort of life that happens in a print when there's a problem to solve, and that they get to it.
And and sometimes I see an artist like Adili who's just there, who made some lovely prints, but not very many. I mean, he made some with Flying Horse, but his work is incredibly graphic. And then I met him, and he was talking how much he loved Bridget Riley and Joseph Albers and Sol LeWitt. And I was like, well, why don't you have a catalogue resume of prints already there? And it was because, well, I haven't really had the opportunity, or I don't really know, and I'm nervous about it. And it's like, great, go into studio, have fun. We'll back you. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And that's I'm looking for an artist who's got that kind of enthusiasm and that potential.
Right. But the thing is to remind people is that you're looking. You're always looking.
Yeah.
That's
I've always got my long list.
Yeah. So for you, Dani, when you're thinking about prints, are you, as a collector who has probably more work than wall space, for you, are you putting prints in drawers? Are you preferring to frame? It's always fun for people to understand how collectors live with them.
Some are in drawers, but some are hanging, and some are in frames, and some are in storage. I normally like to live with the works that I buy, and so it's hard to put everything on the walls, but because you don't have enough walls. But I don't do the homework that you do, tell people to do to protect them crazy, because I want to enjoy them. So if you have to really protect even the same with photography, to have dark glasses and close the curtains every time you leave the house and so on. I can't do that.
No.
And so, this is the truth. And I try to protect as much as I can, but I want to enjoy the works of art. And I know the paper gets a little bit yellow and so on, but I'm not thinking about I'm going to sell them, so it's not such a big concern for me. Mm-hmm. My kids will have the problem.
I always like to kick the can down the road when you
That's
just
right.
because it's something you love.
That's
You're like,
right.
nope, I love it. Well, let's move it down the road.
Yeah, that'll be my problem.
Your problem, that's right.
Yeah.
So is there any advice that you would want to give people who are interested in buying prints? Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of ways they can start by coming to a primary publisher and dealer. They can go to an auction house, but it seems it's always been said that it's a really good entryway into collecting art and collecting an artist you may love but maybe can't afford the painting or the sculpture. Is there any advice in the way you would help people start looking?
Well, I always tell people to buy what you love. I mean, that is absolutely, because you are the one looking at it every day, so you have to love it. It doesn't matter if, but this artist is highly sought after and this was such a good deal. No, that's not how to buy prints. It is to buy what you love. I liked David's advice. Go talk to the publisher. If you're at an art fair, ask a question. Say, how did the artist make this? What was the artist thinking? If you have questions about it, ask. And especially at art fairs, this is the place to get your questions answered. The dealers are here for you. The dealers are here to talk to you. If you go to an auction house, to an opening at an auction house, or if you see something at an auction, email the specialist. There's nothing more that specialists like to do than talk to you about artwork, because it's what we're passionate about. And if you have questions about something, then they will be more than happy to talk to you about it. So that, I think, is it. It's just, if you see something you like, ask questions.
I mean, and I'll point out, publishers probably know more about it than anybody else,
Yes.
because you spend so much time with them. So you really know why they've made that work, and you really know what it's gone through to get to the place that it is. All those steps, all that paper thrown away, all that time. And so if you want to really understand more about that artist's working practice, talk to the printers and publishers directly. And this sort of setting where you've got a lot of publishers here who are also the printers or are intimately involved with the printers, it's a really rare and unique glimpse into that artist's creative process. So we've reached our moment to transfer this over to you all with questions. And so if you have a question, please raise